is a motion, Parks Smith requesting the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation to present its strategic plan for economic development for the years 2010 through 2014.
Should we just give them?
No, Mr. Allen, I understand you have to leave it too? Is that
No, I can stay a little bit longer.
Okay, okay.
Thank you very much.
Please?
We're discovering that we apparently have a newer version of PowerPoint in our offices that we brought a presentation on than you have here in the meeting room, so I may have to hand you a handwritten copy of the PowerPoint because we're struggling to get it up.
Oh, I see. Well, that would not be the first time somebody else has more technology than we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Councilmember, for the opportunity to present today. The nature of this presentation is to talk about what has turned out to be the first ever consensus strategic plan for economic development in the history of Los Angeles County. And I started the presentation with a slide that asks a simple question: why does the 19th largest economy in the world need a strategic plan for economic development? And I take a few moments to celebrate what Los Angeles County is already the capital of, and in many ways that is because of the significant role that the city plays in the county's economy. But we are the capital of the entertainment industry in this world. LA County is the #1 entertainment industry employer with 261,000 jobs. Beyond that, we're actually also the creative capital of America. When you add to the motion picture and television production, music and apparel design and furniture and fashion and video games, music, all the different aspects of the broader creative economy, there's actually 26,000 establishments in the county employing 342,000 people in the creative industries. When you're that creative, you tend to want to make things. We've also become the manufacturing capital of America, employing over 389,000 people in 14,000 different manufacturing establishments. And this is an important foundation for the plan we're going to talk about, because many people perceive that manufacturing has left Los Angeles County, has left Southern California. And while there's been a significant and troubling decline in manufacturing jobs, this region is still the capital of manufacturing for America and is an important foundation on which we need to build. When you are as creative as we are and as proficient in manufacturing as we've become, you need to export your goods to markets all around the world, and through wise investments made by this city and others, creating ports and airports and other access points and gateways to the global marketplace, we've become the international trade capital of America as well. We have the #1 and #2 ports in the ports of LA and Long Beach, the #1 customs district in the nation, one of the busiest origin and destination airports in the world, and as you well know, we handle more than 40% of all the waterborne cargo coming by water into this nation through our 2 ports. With all these different capitals, we have actually become the business capital of America. We will cede the title of financial capital to New York, but not the title of business capital. Los Angeles County has 418,000 business establishments. The nearest county is Cook County, where Chicago resides, with 140,000 business establishments. New York has 118,000 business establishments. So LA County is very much the business capital. So I come back to the question, why does that extraordinary economy, 19th largest in the world, need a strategic plan for economic development? And the very concerning answer is because we've not been creating enough jobs for our growing population, and we need to have a plan to create enough jobs for our growing population. This is somewhat true of the state of California, where the population has grown since 1980 by 14.7 million people, and the jobs have only grown by 4.3 million. At the county level, we've only created about 457,000 jobs for 2.8 million additional population since 1980. But most troubling of all, and why I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak to you as leaders of the City Council here, is that the City of Los Angeles since 1980 has seen its population grow by 1 million and actually lost more than 100,000 jobs. We have 100,000 less jobs in the city today than we had in 1980, but 1 million more people. And when you're trying to provide services, as this city is struggling to do, with limited resources based on a smaller private sector level of activity in the last 30 years, that becomes an enormous challenge that you all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So recognizing that the city and the county have underperformed, we started a couple years ago with a shared vision that we tested with a number of partners in business and labor and government and education, that of a strong, diverse, and sustainable economy for LA County's residents and communities. It was important not only that it be a strong economy, but it be a diverse economy. And diverse, by diversity in the economy, we're talking about the different industry sectors, as well as the different international communities that are represented throughout the Los Angeles area. And by sustainable, we mean not only sustainable with a responsible use of our environmental resources and our footprint on this environment, but also sustainable over the long term. So with that shared vision, we began to bring folks together to talk about the need for a consensus plan, one that could be shared by labor and the environmental community as much as by the business, government, and education communities. And this was a plan that had really triple bottom line goals for economic development that would strengthen our economy, improve our environment, and invigorate our communities. The goal is to share prosperity more broadly through the region as we build this more vital economy in the future. We wanted to make sure that we were developing strategies from a basis of solid factual information. So we started by surveying 5,000 businesses in the county, businesses of all sizes and types from all geographic areas across the county. Then brought a few hundred of their principals in for focus groups to drill down on what they told us. Then actually did a survey of foreign-owned businesses in the county, the first one ever done of its kind, where we found 4,500 foreign-owned enterprises in LA County that employ 138,000 people directly and another 222,000 indirectly, for a total of about 360,000 people, which is about 1 in every 10 private sector workers in the county works for a foreign-owned entity, like a Honda, like a Toyota, like a Sony, but also brand names that we think as very American, like Bank of the West, which is actually a French company, or Motel 6, or 7-Eleven, which is actually a Japanese company. And so we looked at the needs of U.S.-based businesses, foreign-owned businesses, and the information we got from them, we began to compare against more prosperous regions around the nation and around the world, regions that were seeing economic growth. What were they doing to address these very real and common concerns of business? And we found that it broke down into 5 basic areas that I'll share with you in a moment. We took those 5 areas and simply set up some bullet points for discussion, a straw man document that was very much just an outline of ideas to take to the broader community and say, what are your ideas about how we can improve the quality of our workforce, how we can improve access to capital, how we can ensure sufficient land for the siting and growth of businesses? We conducted 26 public workshops and solicited input from more than 1,050 stakeholder organizations, including the major labor organizations hosted by Maria Elena Durazo at the LA County Federation of Labor Office, environmental groups and environmental justice groups hosted at our office and over at UCLA. The National Association of Women Business Owners hosted meetings, many councils of government, many chambers of commerce, many economic development organizations, many community colleges, and others. And we brought these disparate voices together and said, let's develop a plan together that we can all buy into. This is not business's plan. It is not labor's plan. It is the broader community's plan that we can all share in its implementation. We incorporated their feedback and shaped what you have before you in the color printed document, which is the first ever plan of its kind, and it was taken before the County Board of Supervisors at the end of the year after a year-long process of public workshops in 2009, and they immediately and unanimously adopted it on December 22nd, 2009. The 5 aspirational goals that it speaks of are preparing an educated workforce, creating a business-friendly environment, enhancing our quality of life, implementing smart land use, and building 21st century infrastructure. In the area of preparing an educated workforce, there were 3 basic objectives. One dealt with K through 12 education, one dealt with adult workforce development, and a third dealt with preparing both job seekers and incumbent workers to access sectors with higher value jobs and built-in career ladders. So there are a series of strategies before you, and I'll just touch on some broad highlights of them. Strategies to just frankly make our schools perform better in the interest of students. The key goal there is that we'll see more successful educational outcomes at every level. We want all of our students to, at a minimum, achieve grade level proficiency and graduate. And there are opportunities through tracking performance, building smaller schools and learning communities, increasing technology, arts, language, and STEM education, some teacher training strategies, multiple pathways approaches that prepare students for college and career, and strengthening linkages with partners in our communities to enable our schools to perform better. And there's a series of strategies around developing such formal partnerships and increasing student access and student and parent engagement. The premise here is that as we improve basic education, our students can then take better advantage of our adult workforce training systems, our community colleges, our state universities, our public and private sector training programs, which require people to have basic literacy and math skills in order to be able to successfully receive the more specific areas of education needed to work in our life sciences, our aerospace, our trade and logistics, manufacturing, technology, other industries. So there's a series of strategies then that talk about how we'll better prepare a more educated workforce to ensure that businesses have enough workers with the right skill sets to meet their needs, including conducting and publishing more research on workforce shortages and skills gaps. We have a problem both in the city and county with major employers like Northrop Grumman and Boeing. Northrop, as you know, has more than 20,000 employees in the region, Boeing more than 12,000 employees in the region. In the midst of the worst recession in our lifetimes, each of those companies has hundreds of jobs they can't fill right now because they can't find the workers with the right skill sets for certain technical and engineering jobs. So we want to publish more information on that because we find that our education partners are highly responsive, and given the right information, they can develop the right curriculum and attract students and provide them those skills they need to compete for those jobs. We want to see more funding of workforce intermediaries, which is something the LA City WIB has been doing, more sector-based training, again something the LA City WIB has been doing. We want to integrate more workforce training activities with higher education institutions and overall higher education aspirational goals. We also want to help our people both in their present careers and seeking to enter new fields to identify sectors with high-value jobs as measured by wages and benefits, high-value wages and benefits, but also by additional income attracted into the county. The collective group that came together really expressed a bias for export-oriented industries, industries that bring wealth into our region, where we take the talents of our people and make products and develop and deliver services throughout the world for which people pay monies that come back into this economy and can circulate through this economy in the population-serving clusters like retail and construction and other areas of the population-serving economy. The next broad area beyond the education area is really an important one for us to focus on today, and that's creating a more business-friendly environment. And this was focused not only at our local governments, but at our state government and, frankly, the broader community. We know that you've done a lot in the city of LA recently to try and make the city a more hospitable place for filming. This is an important example of being more business-friendly to a major employer with good quality jobs and benefits. And many in our communities need to also be more business-friendly and need to recognize the opportunity that film production in their communities represents. But there was clearly and broadly expressed a concern that many of our cities and our county and our state had substantial room for improvement in the area of being more business friendly. California, as you know, ranks last 5 years in a row in the National Chief Executive Magazine survey of 650 top CEOs across the country. California continues to rank dead last as a place to do business. And LA as a city and LA as a county have also ranked fairly poorly in a number of these surveys. And so we want to work with each of our cities. There are 88 cities in the county, and all of them need to be more business friendly. That's why we applaud the creation of this committee and the attention you are paying to this effort, so that we can demonstrate that we are going to be more of a partner with business of all size, of all types, to enable their growth and success, because they're critical to the city's ability to create private sector jobs and the tax revenues that flow from them that provide the city with the municipal revenues needed to provide the services people expect. A number of strategies were identified, including developing economic development elements in the general plans of cities. Only 22 of our 88 cities have an economic development element in their general plan. I don't believe the city of LA is one of those. Many of the ones who do have such an element have outdated, outmoded elements. Coincidentally, you know, we've honored some cities like El Segundo and Santa Clarita and others for being the most business-friendly cities in LA County in recent years. All of them have an economic development element in their general plan, and it seems to have helped focus their elected leadership, their staff leadership, and the broader community in those cities on what strategies are relevant for their city. And so it's our advice and recommendation that the city would look at adding an economic development element to the general plan so that the city can have its own unique conversation, perhaps based on the principles in this plan, but really focused on the unique needs and opportunities for the city of LA.
Is that a charter change?
I don't think it would require a charter change. And it is not, by the way, a required element under state law. You are, I think, complying with state law on all the required elements. I think it's an option that this city and others could simply voluntarily choose to do. And recognizing the resource constraints, we are willing to work with the state's Office of Planning and Research to identify some of the best economic development elements in general plans across the state, collect those and create some sort of a simple white paper that would show perhaps a sample template, a menu of options that might make it easier for the city to consider their options as to an economic development.
I like that. What do you think?
I didn't quite understand it. You said what was the issue of the charter?
No. Whether or not to establish an economic development element, like our planning element, land use element, and would require a charter change. And our CLA representative is nodding his head no. So, but we're going to have them come back and report. But this is something that I like already, and
Right.
You know, I'll work with the CLA to make sure we put a focus on that.
Terrific. And again, this committee is focused on, I think, the next bullet point, which is helping government develop more efficient processes and a stronger customer service ethic. Clearly, with what you're looking at in terms of business tax reform, clearly with what you're looking at in terms of reforming the processes by which businesses do business in the city of LA, is really addressing this. Businesses can locate
I'd like
anywhere.
to just interrupt to let the masses of people that are listening to this know that we are joined by Councilmember Parks and Krikorian, and we have a full committee.
Thank you very much. So this notion of developing more efficient processes, I know the city recently announced a simplified process for opening a restaurant in the city, which is a very good step in the right direction. These kinds of streamlining processes in planning and building and safety and other departments that interface with business are exactly the right step that you want to move in. Next area is developing a stronger commitment to retaining and expanding the existing job base while proactively attracting new businesses, industries, jobs, and investment. So this speaks to developing a compelling, consistent value proposition and brand for LA County. The city may want to do this as well. It may be something that the county and city would want to share in an enhanced brand marketing of the Los Angeles brand. But the goal beyond just that sort of brand development is to specifically outreach to businesses, both here in the market already and around the country and around the world, to tell them why they should be in the Los Angeles area. On the area of retention, the city has clearly stepped up its efforts with the hiring of Austin Butner and his assignment for his staff to cold call businesses within the city each week and go out and visit those businesses and assess their needs. That's a step in the right direction. The LADC has been contracted by the LA City WIB to operate a layoff aversion program to try and get out and see a significant number of businesses across the city of LA and address their needs that may be leading towards layoffs and try and avert those layoffs through appropriate interventions. Aligning local and statewide tax incentive policies with economic development priorities was an idea strongly endorsed by all, and you have a real opportunity here with what you're doing with the Business Tax Advisory Committee. Looking at whether your local tax policies are aligned with your economic development priorities. Are the different categories appropriate? Are there strategies being employed to encourage transit-oriented development or to encourage large employers as well as small employers? Is the enforcement fair and appropriate?
Excuse me,
Yes.
Bill, but before you go on to the next section, I was curious we've had this conversation in this committee before about the size of businesses and the fact that the vast majority of businesses are micro enterprises, not even small businesses,
Right.
and businesses that employ 5 or less. And the numbers on the chart that show that we have 418,000 businesses compared to Cook County, which has 140,000 with relatively the same population.
Well, we're larger because it's the county again rather than the
Yeah.
city. You're right. The two cities have relatively similar populations, but the county
counties?
of LA has a larger population than Cook County.
How big is Cook?
I think it is much closer to 3 or 4 million than it is the 10.5 million that we are in LA County. I could be wrong. It could be 4 or 5, but I
Okay.
don't think it's.
But
really
did you do any kind of assessment on how many businesses are the smallest businesses versus?
We did. When we did the survey, we surveyed businesses that had 5 or 10 or more employees because that's the large number. There are very few businesses, as you well know, in the city and county with 1,000 or more.
But the vast
employees.
majority of employees work for micro enterprises.
There are a significant number of people who work for non-employer firms. They are a sole operator of a business with.
I understand, but it always seems to me, and I'm sensitive to this because not only on a personal level, my father was a micro business for 45 years in Sun Valley, and my wife is a micro business for the last 17, 18 years.
Right.
And I wrote the legislation that created the definition of micro enterprise, and in the state of California. And what I know is that most jobs are created in this sector. So I would assume that most job losses occur in this sector as well. And it always seems to me that in all the economic development studies that we look at, that sector is largely ignored. In fact, the Small Business Administration was not even providing loans to that sector because there was no formal definition until I created it.
I think that.
So I'm very concerned with a need to focus in that area.
And we share your concern, and I think that voice was heard loud and clear during the survey process. Those very small businesses were heard, and in the public process, those very small businesses were represented by a number of small business assistance centers who participated in the development of the plan. And they said the problems dealing with local governments are particularly acute for micro businesses. People don't have the wherewithal to hire an attorney or hire an expediter to help them get through a planning and permit review process. They often don't know where to turn for help, whether it's dealing with capital issues, permitting issues, regulatory issues, land use issues. The problems that we're trying to address in this plan are particularly acute for that
most
audience.
Attorneys are micro enterprises. I mean, and yeah, it also is complementary to the notion of, I think, the spirit of Los Angeles, the creativity. That part of that creativity includes being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Or at least the same juices flow, and so our professional services. So we're not talking about people who are uneducated. First of all, there is a huge and growing business class of micro enterprises that are first generation immigrants and women. The majority, in fact. But they are largely uneducated, not necessarily even having any exposure to college. So that's a tremendous growth opportunity. In other words, instead of talking about educating our kids, we need to be talking about educating our business folks.
We agree. We talk about entrepreneurial education in our multiple pathways section. We want to prepare people for college, for careers, and for entrepreneurship. We agree with you wholeheartedly.
Right. And yeah, and but it also speaks to the need to define these categories very clearly, and I think many people have forgotten to do that. I'm actually speaking for the CLA because I'm going to ask them to come back with a report to extrapolate or to analyze your report and then extrapolate opportunities for action that the City Council could take. So that's why I'm sort of giving it some indications. So, okay, you were on the...
So I'm now in the section...
You were just finishing the business-friendly environment.
That's right. And so the next part of that section talks about if we're focusing on retaining the jobs, the companies that we do have in the community, we also need to focus on bringing new investment into the region. And so there's a section here that talks about developing sector-specific value propositions and strategies so that we can attract new businesses, industries, jobs, and investment into the region. the needs of an entertainment business, an apparel business, a design business, a furniture business, a toy business are all very different needs, and so we need to have very clearly defined strategies that address the different needs of those different sectors. We also need to focus more on international trade, tourism, and foreign direct investment. We have a wealth of opportunity in this region because of the extraordinarily diversified nature of our population. The number of cultures, languages, countries, ethnicities represented give us a huge opportunity in international trade. The presence of our ports and our airport, our position on the Pacific Rim. This will be very much a Pacific-centered economy in the next 100 years. These give us enormous opportunities through international trade, and we should be much more aggressive about growing that. We have a national export initiative that President Obama has announced to double exports. We are the manufacturing capital of America. We should really be focused on how will we double the exports in our region, because that will create jobs and wealth for our region. Tourism, clearly a significant opportunity, the largest employment sector in the county, and foreign direct investment. I really want to make sure we focus on that. There was a big win for the city on April 30 when BYD, the Chinese battery and electric vehicle manufacturer, announced that it will place its headquarters at 1800 South Figueroa. That was a company I first met 2 years ago at the World Economic Forum and began the recruitment here to the region. We at the LADC spent 2 years recruiting them, showed them 100 sites across the county, and the city of LA is to be congratulated for winning that competition, landing those initial 150 to 200 jobs, which may grow to many, many hundreds of additional jobs as they expand their enterprise here. But there are significant additional opportunities throughout Asia, Europe, Central and Latin America that can really create new jobs, new investment, new technologies, new processes here in our economy. And we're ideally positioned for that, but we have to be proactive and aggressive about seeking those opportunities. And we must ensure greater access to capital at all stages of corporate development, to these micro enterprises, to early stage companies growing out of our university and other research facilities, to our middle market companies, to our mature companies. Capital is the lifeblood of a growing business, and we must ensure sufficient access from public and private sources. Finally, this research area. We are blessed with extraordinary research universities. UCLA is always in the top 5 of federally funded research institutions, about $900 million a year. USC receives about $450 million, Caltech about $350 million, and those figures do not include the $1 billion that Caltech receives to operate JPL for NASA. So we have a tremendous amount of federally funded research going on here, not to mention research at Cedars-Sinai, City of Hope, LA Biomed, and other institutions. We need to partner, all of us in the community, in the pursuit of more of those research funding opportunities, not only from federal but state and other investments, but also private research investment. And then we must create a more supportive infrastructure and stronger networks in the region to facilitate the commercialization of that research. While we place very high in the amount of research spending in our area, we don't place as highly in the commercialization success rates. We have companies that are being created, but in many cases they are leaving the area. They are companies created out of the intellectual talent at UCLA or USC or Caltech, but they're locating in San Diego or the Silicon Valley or Texas. And we need to be developing strategies to keep those companies here, which may involve land use strategies of developing research parks. It may involve tax structures. It may involve other networks being built to connect capital and mentors and additional service providers who can ensure the successful development of early stage companies. Quality of life is the next section of the report, really influenced by a fellow named Richard Florida, who writes about the creative class and its impact on the economy today and in the future, and the fact that people are more mobile and global than any time in world history, and the best and brightest, most talented people can live wherever they want to, and so we have to ensure that we have as attractive and affordable a quality of life as possible. That's the core role of a city government. These areas are your areas of expertise, ensuring public safety, improving mobility, housing issues, healthy living, cultural and artistic amenities. This is an area clearly that the city is heavily focused on. We want to encourage that continued focus and attention to ensuring that this is the safest big city in America, that people can move their employees and goods and customers through the region more efficiently, that we can remove obstacles and create more incentives to encourage the construction of housing at all price points, that we can make our communities more desirable places to live by encouraging healthier living through parks, recreation, wellness programs, locally sourced foods, encourage and expand our cultural and artistic amenities. And this final idea has actually spawned a new program. This final idea that came from the community was creating healthier, more vibrant, and stronger communities by balancing our land use, transportation, economic development, housing, and environmental objectives. Because of the consensus collaborative nature of the development of this plan, this particular idea generated a lot of energy and has led to a project called Vision LA that we're working on that started here in the city and has now moved to a countywide effort that has city representation from 6 other cities and from the county government, representation from business and labor, and representation from major environmental justice organizations. And it is developing short, intermediate, and long-term strategies that do exactly what is said here. They balance our land use, transportation, economic development, housing, and environmental objectives to create a mobility system that is far superior to what we have today and that reaches those multiple bottom line objectives. There was also a considerable amount of attention to focus on being more creative, using more resources that are available in the world today, and new approaches to revitalizing our low-income communities. Some of the things the city is talking about in Jordan Downs, Nickerson Garden areas are examples of that. Increasing community participation in the planning and jobs creation process, using smart growth principles to economically integrate our communities, and increasing affordable housing and open space as part of the revitalization of these areas. Which leads us into the land use section, which, again, a great deal of attention was paid to. I opened the presentation talking about the city of LA having less jobs today than it did in 1980. One of the reasons the city has drastically underperformed in the creation of jobs over the last 3 decades is the conversion of industrial land in the city. About 30% of the city's industrial land, which was only ever 8% of the total city land base. The city has 8% of its land zoned for industrial. 30% of that has been converted to non-industrial purposes, largely associated with our growing population. Housing, schools, police and fire facilities, libraries, parks. As we add population, we need to build schools, we need to build housing, we need to build parks and police and fire facilities. But we forgot that we also needed to invest in the development of business parks, industrial parks, office parks, so that the people that were coming here or growing up here in our families had a place to work. And so not only did we forget to make that investment, we took away a third of the land on which our path out of poverty and into the middle class existed.
I want to mention an anecdote. When I was working with the Selleck family to develop the General Motors plant in Van Nuys, I was insistent that it be a manufacturing opportunity. The Selleck family wanted 100% retail on the site, and we went back and forth, and eventually we were able to negotiate 50-50. On the day that we opened the plant, Dan Selleck looked at me and said, "I wish we had done 100% manufacturing."
You were right. You were giving them the right advice. But even the 50-50 you did supported the retail, the Voight piece of that you're talking about.
Well, but the point is, how do we get us all on the same page,
right?
So that we're making the same decisions at the same time.
You've made a good start, by the way, in the city with the industrial land use policy discussion of the last couple of years, where the council and the mayor decided to actually enforce the existing industrial land use designations. Same way New York has their industrial business zones. Mm-hmm. Chicago has a new renewed effort to preserve and invest in their industrial zones.
One of the challenges that I've experienced in the Northeast San Fernando Valley is not just the loss of industrial. In fact, we've maintained the most healthy dose of industrial in the San Fernando Valley, but the use is different. The wage level is almost identical today as it was 30 years ago. The average wage for those same industrial properties. So the jobs, while we've been able to maintain industrial, the problem isn't whether it's industrial or commercial. The problem is that the wages for the industrial have dropped by virtue of light manufacturing versus heavy manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to see heavy manufacturing like we saw it before. We're just not. So how are we going to identify those industries in the light manufacturing sector that provide the best wages?
Well, I think the city's on the right track in the clean tech area as relates to electric vehicles. I think attracting companies like BYD, knowing that you already have Toyota and Honda here, you have Fisker in Orange County, you have Coda in Santa Monica who's looking at sites in the county right now. There's a Korean company we're working with to look in the county. If we can cluster together half a dozen of these electric vehicle manufacturers, there's still an opportunity for some electric vehicle assembly, which is in BYD's long-term interest. They also have interest in competing on larger scale projects projects, for buses, for rail cars. I mean, they make a remarkable array of electric vehicles. They have 30,000 engineers in their company, and they're willing to do local assembly and local hiring here in the LA area. So I think that's certainly one area. We should not be giving up on the aerospace industry. We should be redoubling our efforts to win aerospace contracts because we have an extraordinarily talented population, whereas, you know, the wage rates are very high. They're closer to 80,000 average wage rates in aerospace manufacturing than the high 40s that the general manufacturing wage rate is.
Yeah, a huge part of that transition in the northeast San Fernando Valley was the loss of Lockheed.
That's correct.
And all the ancillary businesses on the San Fernando Road corridor.
But as you know, even the remaining light manufacturing jobs pay substantially more than the retail jobs, so we have to be careful. And one of the absolute realities is that cities have a heavy incentive to develop retail because of the sales tax importance to a city's
Well,
budget.
in fact, I struggled with that at the General Motors plant, and we were lucky that we had one heavy manufacturer that located there was the anchor, but it's a difficult process. In fact, I just saw somebody's running for U.S. Senator, doesn't have a chance in the world, but they had a picture of the plant in there, and they were saying, look at all these retail jobs, and I wanted to slap the guy, but did you want to talk about the infrastructure just a little bit?
Yeah, let me just quickly jump to that infrastructure piece. Just on the land use piece, I'll say that something you might want to focus on is looking at the city's own real estate portfolio, because we found thousands of parcels at the county and city levels, school district levels, water district levels, thousands of parcels representing tens of thousands of acres that are either undeveloped or underdeveloped that could be brought to use to attract private sector opportunity or public-private development of a property. And so there's an opportunity there, I think, for the city to devote some attention. Reserving employment land for research and development uses. You have two of the great research universities of the world in UCLA and USC. The city should look at what could be done adjacent to or nearby those universities to develop research facilities near their main campuses or near the health science campuses. And finally, updating the general community and specific plans and then developing incentive programs for commercial industrial activities in those corridors, looking at your clean tech corridor strategies. What can the CRA do? What can the Port of LA do? What can the Department of Water and Power do? What can all these arms of the city do to create additional incentives for commercial industrial investment within the city? And of course, continue to aggressively attract and support incentive zones. The enterprise zone program is under some threat at the state level because of the state's budget crisis. We know, because we have helped attract or retain 162,000 jobs for LA County in the last dozen or so years, how important it has been to have enterprise zones in which to site these businesses. The city recently expanded its enterprise zones in the San Fernando Valley. This is the right thing to do. One final point on land use was CEQA. A surprising number of people mentioned the abuse of CEQA, which is, of course, an important environmental statute, but which has been used by other interests for non-environmental reasons. They've used that for anti-competitive business practices, smaller businesses who don't want larger businesses in a community. And so we need to take a look at that, because the number of projects in this city and cities throughout the state that have been delayed or permanently denied based on CEQA actions that really had nothing to do with the environment is troubling and has cost, we believe, hundreds of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars of activity in the region. The final area is infrastructure. There was a strong sense that the process of developing infrastructure locally and statewide is broken. We have $500 billion of identified infrastructure needs in the state of California and less than $100 billion of identified public sources of capital. There's at least a $400 billion gap. The reason we became the 19th largest economy in LA County and that this city became one of the great cities of the world is because of the investment generations ago in building the Port of Los Angeles International Airport, the Department of Water and Power. Our water systems, highway systems, transit systems were all critical to the development of the economy of this region, but we've not kept up. We have to do a better job of balancing local and regional interests. I used to live in the flight path of the Burbank Airport, so I'm very sensitive to what it is to live near an airport. But the consensus of this broad stakeholder group of 1,050 organizations was we often listen too much to the people adjacent to something like the LA airport and forget what it means to the entire city, the entire county, the entire region. Just the international flights alone at LAX contribute over $80 billion a year to the Southern California economy. Each daily international transoceanic flight supports 3,100 jobs in Southern California and $623 million a year of the Southern California economy. We've lost 9 of those to the San Francisco airport since they did their international terminal improvements. So I applaud the city now for what it's doing. First, cosmetically improving Tom Bradley International Terminal, and now adding 10 gates and expanding Bradley West. That's absolutely necessary to regain some of those flights and to regain the jobs and economic activity associated with those flights. People identified specifically the ports, the green growth projects at the port were clearly identified. Projects that will allow for more job creation with less environmental impact. On and near dock rail projects, terminal improvements, channel deepening to ensure that we can bring the largest ships that carry the most cargo, that create the most jobs for our region. All those are absolutely essential at the ports of LA and Long Beach. Modernizing LA Airport, not just the international terminals, but making improvements with the domestic terminals, the central utility plant, eventually the consolidated car rental facilities and other aspects that cause that airport to rank 19th out of 20 major international gateways in this country in terms of customer satisfaction. We need to improve that. Our energy systems, our water systems, our ground transportation systems, our telecommunication systems, our waste handling systems all need substantial investment. And there are companies all over the world standing by to help invest in partnership with our local, state, and federal governments to make improvements of these. And we really have to open our minds and develop strategies to bring in the best that the private sector can offer while continuing to have the controls necessary that the public sector wants to have in the development of these projects. There are solutions. They're being done in other states. We've done some of them. The Alameda Corridor was an example of that. We need to do more of that here in the city and in the county and, frankly, across the state. So now we move into implementation. The county adopted this in December. We realized that we're one organization. We had 1,050 organizations help create the plan. We want to see hundreds of organizations help move it forward. So we've had immediate volunteers from the Unite LA group that's affiliated with the LA Chamber, that was the force behind the recent LA Compact with the schools and the school board and the mayor and other interested parties committed to reforming and improving student outcomes in LA Unified, which serves 24 of our 88 cities. The LA County Federation of Business, which has most of the chambers of commerce throughout the county as members, they've stepped up to say, why don't we have our LA Chamber of Commerce have conversations with the City of LA, our Torrance Chamber of Commerce have conversations with the City of Torrance, our Monrovia Chamber have conversations with the City of Monrovia. So we have local business people and local government having a conversation about what's appropriate for those cities to become more business friendly and more enablers of economic vitality. The Urban Land Institute has stepped up to say we really endorse, adopt, and want to help lead the implementation of these land use principles identified by the community. Our own infrastructure committee, which has representation from the leadership of the ports, the airports, the utilities, and others, Metropolitan Transit Authority, has agreed to play a role in expediting the development and financing of these major infrastructure projects. The councils of government in the region have expressed some interest in helping take a leadership role working with their city members on the quality of life issues. And I should tell you, local governments are coming on board quite regularly. I've done presentations before the Gateway Cities Council of Government, the San Gabriel Valley Council of Government, and the South Bay Council of Government, which between them are home to 74 of the 88 cities in LA County, and all 3 unanimously endorsed the plan. And many of their cities are now inviting members of our staff to come and do individual presentations. I was in the city of Lomita 2 weeks ago where they endorsed the plan with a 5-0 council vote. Everybody has asked, how will we track our collective progress? This isn't just the LADC. We were the facilitator of a broad coalition of people, including many representatives of the city of Los Angeles, who want to link arms and move forward in implementing a set of strategies that will ensure a stronger, more diverse, more sustainable economy. How will we know we're getting there? So there's a series of performance measures which you can find today on the website created to support this plan, LACountyStrategicPlan.com. There are workforce measures, high school graduation rates, literacy and math proficiency, sector-based training initiatives in the region. I would urge you to pay close attention to this list on create a business-friendly environment. We'll be tracking cities that have economic development strategies. We'll be tracking local business tax rates in the cities. And again, through your BTAC effort, you have a chance to adjust rates and policies and bring them in alignment with the city's economic development strategies so they enable and incentivize the economic goals you have for the city, as opposed to perhaps impede as they have in the past. Public research investment we'll be tracking. Are we attracting more federal and state research investment into this region? Are we commercializing that research activity? How many new companies, how many new jobs are growing out of this intellectual activity? What's the level of private investment in the region? Are new companies opening here? Is venture capital flowing into the region? Is foreign direct investment coming into the region? And when you look at those things, you will also see impacts on employment in the region. And we will track employment and wages, both average wages, because we hope to see wages rising, average wages rising, and also total wages. We want more people back to work, earning higher levels of income. Quality of life measures, you know well, commute times, public safety indexes, air quality, housing affordability, land use measures are in here, infrastructure measures, talking about infrastructure investments, projects in construction or completed, the North American Airport Satisfaction Index that I mentioned. We want to see LAX rising in that customer satisfaction index, the Energy Star rating for top U.S. cities, in which the city of LA fares very well. And finally, what are we asking the broader community? And that is to endorse, to educate, and advocate relating to this plan. We want everybody in the community. We've actually set up social media networks to have some viral marketing across the county to encourage people, and hopefully a new generation of civic stewards to step up. Read this plan, understand there's a role for everyone in our communities to play. Educate your neighbors, your business colleagues, your council colleagues. Advocate so that our key elected officials and key stakeholders, public, private, nonprofit sector, and just the average citizen in our communities, understands that they have a role to help implement the plan. That will be the ultimate proof of the success of this plan, is if it creates a groundswell of cultural change in Los Angeles where everyone wants to be part of a healthier economy. I think we have a groundswell of commitment in this region to people wanting to have a healthier environment. I think when you look at the voluntary reactions people have had when asked to conserve water or conserve energy, to build their homes in more efficient ways, to operate their businesses more efficiently, I think there's been a real movement towards a healthier environment in this region of the state. We want to see that same broad consensus commitment to a healthier economy. What can each of us do to nurture and support micro-enterprise? What can we do to encourage the development of new companies, the attraction of new companies, and the retention of the companies and jobs that we have? Thanks very much for the opportunity to present. And
well, first of all, let me
I'm happy to help with.
Let me thank you for your presentation. I'm reminded of a plane trip I took from Chicago to Los Angeles, and I sat next to this guy, and was one of the most intelligent people I ever had the opportunity to meet, and he spoke articulately on just about any subject you could imagine, and we talked about world issues and how to stay healthy. And it was a very engaging 4 hours, and I'm glad to see that the apple didn't fall far from the tree, because that was your father.
Thank you, Ken.
And that was I feel that same sense of every single word counts that I felt when I was on that plane ride. I also want to thank Mr. Parks for introducing this motion to have this presentation. Obviously, we are all concerned with these issues. What I would like to do is ask the CLA to report back to this committee with an implementation plan. It's one thing for us to conceptually agree on these things. It's another thing for us to actually implement some of this stuff and track it, which is part of your goal. So, is there a way that I can do this on 2 tracks to allow the committee to approve this in concept, at the same time have it report back to the committee? We can just send it directly to council, right?
That would actually be the best way to go. That way the instruction gets made, and we'll move forward on the report. In addition, we'll report back on the status of the Business Retention and Attraction Task Force recommendations, all of which fit very neatly into the recommendations that are made here. They dovetail very well.
I think that BTAC should just be one small part of this.
Oh, BTAC is something different from it was called the BRAT Force.
Okay, but so with that, it would be my intent to approve the plan I didn't hear anything that I could disagree with, and asked that the CLA report back to Jobs Business Development Committee with an implementation plan. And a couple of things. I would like to better understand the microenterprise aspect, because I do believe there's tremendous growth and enhancement opportunities in that sector. And I'll be very, very blunt. In my district, there are a lot of very small businesses that just don't know how to operate a business, and they fail. 90% of them in the first year, every year. And so we have increased vacancy rates, and there's just not the synergy we need to build momentum toward a more quality of business sector in the Northeast Valley. But I also recognize the goals to move toward green tech, clean tech, biomed, in terms of wage improvement, and would like to have this whole notion of an economic development element fully explored. I would anticipate that we could support that, and I certainly support it, but would like to see how we make that happen. Okay, with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Parks for what his comments would be. It was his motion.
Mr. Allen, thank you very much. As always, you're very informative. One of the things I was going to ask you, on some of the 5 recommendations are so global that you get your arms around them, trying to figure out how do you create an educational system. Are there some incremental things that came out in the study that maybe did not get into the report that can kind of give a guideline of how to reach these 5 global?
Yes, there are some that are in the longer document,
Okay.
this published document, and there are also some that are emerging from the implementation teams, where they're looking at what can we specifically do on the ground to begin to move forward these broader strategies. What are the tactics that are appropriate? And
So it's a living process.
Absolutely. It's a 5-year implementation process, and a very public, transparent one, in which the website I referred to is telling a lot of case studies as well as providing performance measures of objective.
The other thing I was going to ask you, when you gave the figure of 100,000 jobs if left while the city was growing by 1 million, when we say jobs, is that actual jobs leaving, or is there some transition? The fact that what we see in a great deal is that because of technology and computers, people do not necessarily have to be located anywhere, but they can do business across every boundary.
It's a very important question. It speaks to jobs within the city of LA. It doesn't necessarily mean that people living in the city of LA can't find employment either in the above ground or underground economy, or that they can't find employment in another city or another county. But it's not healthy for the city if too many people are in the underground economy. It's healthier if they're in the above ground economy. It's also healthier for the social fabric of the family and better for our environment if their jobs are within the city they live or very nearby. We have people experiencing very long commute times looking for work in Ventura County or Orange County or other parts of LA County, which adds to environmental problems, traffic congestion problems, and greater investments that need to be made in infrastructure. So the city actually had, and forgive me, I don't have the exact numbers with me today, but I think the number was 1,760,000 jobs for 3 million people. It was just under 1.8 million jobs for 3 million people back in 1980, and today has, I think, only about 1,650,000 jobs for more than 4 million people. So
About 10,000 of those are city employees,
yeah.
just to give you one example.
One thing I was going to ask you also is that where is the migration, because we met, it's been a while, with the then MTA director of Orange County, and his view was that a good number of our jobs, they were job rich in Orange County, and so that's why the freeways are going
Right.
opposite of...
In fact, other parts of this county have created jobs consistently over the 30 years. We have added 457,000 jobs, even counting the recession today. Before this recession, that number was much higher. LA County had created 600 and something thousand jobs in the last 30 years. So other parts of the county have been able to create jobs, not as many as they should have, but substantially more than the city has. So there's something different going on in the city when it's 40% of the county population and the rest of the county's adding 457,000 jobs and the city's losing more than 100,000 jobs. There's something we have to look at. And we think it's a combination of factors. Our research has said it's about the land use, it's about the business tax, it's about regulations, it's about, a tone of interface between business and government. There are a number of factors, but I think the city is in the process of addressing most, if not all, of those.
The other thing was when you were doing the study, was there any discussion about what impact, or if there's some formula that we could come up with as to how government spends its money? If the city of LA that spends $4 billion and the county was double-digit million budget, if you spend it in your particular geographic region, what impact that makes?
We didn't look at that. There was some discussion about local procurement as being an advantage, but we didn't really devote much research attention to that.
Okay. And then let's see, I think that covers it, but I'd look forward to the CLA and coming back with the report, and the fact that it's a living document is refreshing, so that's not just a document that sits on the shelf, but you'll be producing parts of it as you go through the implementation.
I can give you my word, when we went into this process, we made a commitment that the staff and board of the LADC, that this would not be a document that would be produced and put on a shelf. This is a document that will be implemented. We've reorganized our staff, our board, our committees, and our budget to play a new, very strong facilitative role to keep people on task implementing this, but one that's a respectful approach. You are the leaders of the City of Los Angeles. You will decide how the City of Los Angeles will implement the basic goals and initiatives of this countywide consensus plan. We just want to help facilitate that, be of support to that, maybe nudge you once in a while, but it's your decision, and we respect that each city has to make their own decision. And frankly, we want each labor union and each environmental group to find what is their appropriate role in moving forward this broad consensus agenda.
I did have one other question. In the sense of looking at jobs now and in the future, what is your sense in this? Because it's always been an issue for me that the fact that we're not very flexible, that we have people that are saying, they want the highest paying jobs, they want these manufacturing jobs, and the reality is if somebody showed up and said, give me 1 million square foot of manufacturing space, we couldn't serve that anyway. And so it appears that we've not transitioned very quickly from the General Motors plants and the other things to go into business that were more flexible and that could basically move forward and adapt to future transitions of business. And so I was wondering, did you deal with that at all?
A little bit. I think that speaks to land use questions. It speaks to education questions. Do we have a flexible workforce that can provide a number of different skill sets to a number of different industries and employers? Do we have land use policies that allow that flexibility? Do we have a strong enough customer service ethic in our local government that we can make quick decisions so that we can give people the necessary permits, entitlements to change the nature of work going on in a particular site? I think we did have some discussion of that, and there's no question that we are going to have to be more nimble and more flexible as we move forward. But at the same time, I would encourage you not to lose faith in manufacturing and not to believe that it is a foregone conclusion that manufacturing has to continue to decline in our region. In other states, manufacturing has increased in the last 20 years. Texas and a number of other states have seen increased numbers of manufacturing jobs, and we have companies here in LA County coming back from China. Ortho Mattress was purchased by a private equity investor about 8 years ago, and it was losing money. It had a fraction of the sales it has today. They were making all of their mattresses in China, and they were leaving most of their working capital tied up on the water between here and China, and they were guessing wrong all too frequently about what mattresses would sell and to whom, and they'd end up with a warehouse full of mattresses they had to sell off at an outlet store at half price. They changed that model, brought all manufacturing back here to La Mirada. They have a large manufacturing force in a wonderful state-of-the-art factory, and they make every mattress after it has been sold. It's the Dell Computers just-in-time delivery model, where in effect, if you go into any one of the 72 Ortho mattress stores and order a mattress tonight, tomorrow on that factory floor they will start manufacturing that mattress, and the next day it'll be on a truck going to your home. and they are now very profitable, much larger, many more employees, many more revenues, many more stores. They're a thriving company who's proved that you can manufacture more efficiently and effectively in Los Angeles County than in China for that product. And so we're beginning to look at other companies like that to begin to make the case to companies why they should be here. And BYD, who has 150,000 employees in Shenzhen, China, manufacturing some of the finest batteries and electric vehicles in the world, is interested in assembling electric vehicles here in Los Angeles County. And frankly, with the incentives that the city has offered in terms of exposure at the airport and attractive rates at the port and energy arrangements with DWP and other things that have been offered to that company, if the city had a facility large enough to assemble those electric vehicles, I bet BYD would conduct that assembly operation in the city of LA. But that plant may end up going somewhere else in the county because the city doesn't have a large enough facility. So I think as you look at the clean tech corridor and
How big?
I think their site needs to be about 1 million square feet. It's a very large manufacturing facility they have in mind. But the city should be looking at its industrial land and analyzing where the opportunities are in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, in the downtown area, in the harbor area. Really, the city hasn't gone through that exercise in recent years, and there probably are considerable parcels and considerable opportunities and, frankly, considerable pots of money associated with the port or the DWP or CDBG grants or CRA monies or others that the city could assemble and provide some incentives that would encourage perhaps a public-private partnership development of an industrial park that would have the capacity to locate large companies, medium-sized companies, and small companies that could grow and expand in an industrial park, much as we've seen happen in the north end of this county in the last couple of decades. What's gone on in Santa Clarita, in the Antelope Valley, and other areas, and in the Inland Empire, could still be going on in the city of LA if you had the right policies in place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Allen. It's good to see you again. Thank you for this really comprehensive 30,000-foot view of some of the challenges that we have before us in jobs retention. I think that, like any consensus report, this has a lot of great issues that we'll need to look at in much greater depth, but I think it'll be a useful tool in keeping us focused in doing just that. But the implementation, of course, is going to be the key. And in that regard, I saw that one of the research tools that were used in forming the foundation for this was surveying businesses in LA County, 5,000 businesses in LA County. Was there also an effort made to survey businesses that had left Los Angeles County or that had left California? Because I think it would be every single time I've ever had to vote on any regulation or any tax or anything else, the opponents will always say, you see, that's the reason that businesses are leaving California or Los Angeles. Well, I'd like to know what those reasons really are. What are the things that really matter? And I think that would be informative to our decision making too. So was there any effort made to ascertain those facts?
So there was not a specific effort made at that point that we were surveying our businesses in the region. We did consult a lot of literature on site location decisions. What are the factors that companies use when making a decision to move in or out of a region? But we are now purchasing Dun & Bradstreet databases that have told us what companies are leaving the LA County area, including LA City, and where they are going, to what other states. And we intend to contact those companies and say, why did you leave?
Great.
The last report I saw was about 3,900 businesses that had left California in the last year or so, and it tells us exactly what states they've gone to. And they're the states we read about, like Texas and others, that are trying to position themselves as very business-friendly states. And we're going to try and contact some of those companies and say, tell us more about why you left and whether you think the grass is truly greener where you've gone and why. And as we gather that information in the coming months, we'd be happy to share it with you.
And it also, first of all, it's important for policy making. Second, it gives us a database of potential people that we might be able to draw back to.
Absolutely. Years ago, a company, I believe their name was Freeman Cosmetics, went to Nevada in hope of finding greener pastures and came back a year or two later because they missed the talent base that was here in the area and an enormous consumer market and the distribution facilities. So we do intend to try and go reach out to some of those companies who may have left and check and see whether they're really happy or whether they are as part of an attraction strategy.
And you raised the ortho example of coming back from China, which is remarkable. That's you almost never hear those stories, so it's nice to hear that.
Yep.
But that decision seems to have been made based on a changed business model rather than any change in business environment or policy or anything else.
That's right.
Are there recent examples that you can think of successful policy decisions that have been made, or especially important policy decisions that have been made, whether in this county or other counties or statewide or otherwise, that have been especially important in drawing business back? And are there any high priority examples that you can think of that would be low hanging fruit for us?
Yeah, I'm not sure about policy decisions that we've yet tracked that have brought businesses back here, but policy decisions that have helped keep businesses here. The internet tax example that the city went through recently helped keep businesses here in the city. AB 32 is actually a strategy that we think can be used, if implemented correctly, to attract an entirely new business to California, this clean technology industry. The way we are so dominant in info technology, life sciences, nanotechnology, we want to be dominant in clean technology. And we think AB 32...
Let's not forget the film incentives.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the hanging curveball there.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry for missing that one from the author. I apologize, because I was thinking more of manufacturing as we were talking about ortho. You're 100% right. The film incentives, as you well know, when they started last July, have brought more than 60 productions back, is the last count that I heard, contributing more than $1 billion in activity. And forgive me for having my mind over on the manufacturing side and forgetting the all-important entertainment. But that runaway production had reached a crisis point for the city, for the county, and for the state, where there were a handful of studio-financed films that were being made in this state. More films were applying to be made in Michigan than in California, and that is beginning to reverse at the film, feature film, television, independent film level. And in fact, we're conducting a study right now for the California Film Commission about the economic impact of the film incentives, and later this summer we'll have those results and hopefully have a very positive story to tell. But we know that more than $1 billion of economic activity and all the jobs associated with that have come back into this state, and most of them into this county, because of that program.
Thank you. And then finally, on page 5 of your presentation on the Enhancing Quality of Life presentation, there's a reference to increasing community participation in the planning and jobs creation process, which is something I'm very interested in. In my district, we're creating a jobs advisory task force to do exactly that, and I hope to use this sort of a template for how we can create a jobs creation strategy in the second council district. Are there examples that you can think of, or ideas that have developed through this process about how better to enhance community participation in this kind of planning and strategic?
Well, the ethic that came through in the development of this process was we all need to be playing a role in the strategic development of job creation and the actual implementation of job creation in our regions. And for too long it was perceived that business was the lone voice in favor of this. And other interests who were concerned about what the implication of business's agenda meant would often line up in opposition to business's agenda. So the labor community would say, what does this mean for workers' rights and for the labor community? What does this mean for the environment? What does this mean for my community? As opposed to all of us developing a plan together in which we could all understand that there was a win-win opportunity for us. Because of the old way we did things in our separate silos, we developed a reputation here in the LA area beyond NIMBYism. NIMBYism, we know, is the acronym for Not in My Backyard. We took it to such a height that as I travel around the world, people would tell me that we were banana people and cave people. And I said, what does that mean? I'm not familiar with those. And they said, those are acronyms just like NIMBY, but they really describe you people in LA. I said, what does it mean? Banana is an acronym for build absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody. And cave people, the cave is an acronym for citizens against virtually everything. And the examples, in many cases, came from the city. Wendy Gruhl told me a story about wanting to develop a blighted property into some new business opportunity, and being told by the community, we don't want that business opportunity. It will create traffic and noise and whatever the concerns were. So she listened to her community and said, okay, well, let's see what other options are. We need housing. Perhaps there's a residential development that can go on that parcel. The community again rose up, absolutely not. She came back to the community and said, okay, I give up. What's a nice, simple, innocuous land use? Perhaps a park? That brought out the most violent opposition of all. And she said, what's wrong with a park? And they said, they attract homeless people. And she said, I give up. Well, that reputation is known around the world. And there are site consultants who say it's too hard to develop in the city of LA. And they're not just talking about the city government, they're talking about the broader community who has an antipathy towards development. And so our sense is if we can have more voices in the community participate in the visioning and development of strategies for what that community should look at. That's why we talk about updating the general, community, and specific plans. Let's develop a common consensus vision of what we want our communities to look like, and then let's give developers by right development authority. That the community has spoken. They want this here. Come in and propose this to the city, and you will find a welcome audience. That's really, I think, the ethic that was being spoken to in the planning process.
Thank you very much.
I don't know whether I'd rather deal with a banana, a cave, or a NIMBY, but this is a report that encapsulates in a very holistic way all the areas that need to be touched upon. I also want to mention the COGS as a method for negotiating within jurisdictions. The recent Greater San Fernando Valley COG that was established is an opportunity for the San Fernando Valley to develop plans with Burbank, Glendale, Santa Clarita, and what was the other?
San Fernando?
San Fernando, right in the middle of my district. San Fernando, in a way that's more conducive to the needs of the Greater San Fernando Valley than other parts of Los Angeles. I was telling one of the reporters that was asking questions about that there's this one project in where Newhall Land wanted to build 21,000 homes, and they actually planned to do that. But at the same time, there's only 19,000 jobs planned for Santa Clarita in the same 20-year period. And that means that the people are going to come up the 5 freeway and clog the Northeast San Fernando Valley freeways. Not to pick on them, I'm sure Los Angeles has our fair share of encroaching in other people's lives that aren't in our jurisdiction. But it speaks to the need for us to collaborate better. Absolutely. And the need, because I do believe we need the housing, but at the same time, maybe we should be working together to enhance the freeway system or enhance the transit opportunities so that it won't be an encroachment, but a welcome opportunity for both sides of that equation. So I think this puts it in a framework that any community can just jump into and discuss, and particularly working with their neighbors to do that. We have one card from Beverly Kenworthy. And then I hope to move very quickly through items 2, 3, and 4.
Good afternoon, council members. Just very quickly, the LA Chamber is happy to endorse the proposal. We worked in collaboration with the LADC, and I think you might be surprised that one of the areas where we had most collaboration was within the education and workforce development section. Many people are not familiar that the Chamber has such a large group dedicated to education and workforce development, and we are going to be certainly doing our due diligence in working on these recommendations and engaging with the city on implementation. We are going to be scheduling meetings over the summer with each of the council members and to talk about some of the things that you don't often hear from us about. You know, we're always here talking about business tax reform and land use issues, and all of those things are very important to us. But we also have a very strong education and workforce development team, and we are going to be engaging very seriously with you in the near future about the future of LAX. And we feel that we are approaching a critical junction and a critical time where we either bring LAX up to the next generation standards of aviation or we fall behind. And we look forward to having those conversations with you. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, it's my intent to send this back to City Council with approval of this committee. Unanimous? Approval of this committee. As well as to instruct the CLA to report back to this committee with an implementation plan that we will work in concert with you on. Should other players be involved in that?
Should we have Mr. Allen come and give the presentation to council?
I'd be happy to if you'd like me to.
Since it would make him happy.
Okay.
Not many people say it would make him happy to make a presentation to City Council, so...
Other city departments that would likely be involved would be CDD, CRA, Airport, Harbor, and there was another one. CAO.
The human relation... Oh, never mind. Another one.
CDD, CRA, the mayor's office is probably somebody we should talk to.
Any other departments that the CLA would like to reach out to would be encouraged to participate.
Planning department. The economic development component of the general plan would be a planning department issue. So we would need the planning department to participate as well.
Okay. Well, if you could consult with them and any other entity within the city that you think would be appropriate, that would be very helpful.
And if you could make arrangements when it's coming to council that Mr. Allen could come make a presentation.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and council members.
We don't want anybody else, Bill.
No,
Okay,
I will be here. Thank you for that invitation and for this invitation today and for all your leadership on these issues. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you. We're following your leadership. We appreciate it. Thank you. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is a Business Tax Advisory Committee communication dated June 3rd, 2010, recommending the city draft and release a request for proposals for an economic study to determine the fiscal impact of certain BTAC recommendations relative to the city's business tax issues.
I don't know how much in depth we have to go here. The idea would be to ask the Office of Finance to, with the assistance of the CAO and City Attorney, to report back to this committee in 30 days with a cost estimate for this study, where the funds might come from, and whether or not there is justification in contracting out for this study. So with that, if you could just talk about what your proposal is.
Thank you, Councilmember. And Mr. Chairman, what you have in front of you is the recommendation of BTAC to commission a econometric study. These are all of the recommendations that have come through BTAC, all of which have been unanimously approved, that have what we perceive to be an economic impact, either positive or negative, on the city. The study would be designed to look at all factors, including expansion of the city's tax base, by, in effect, making the city more business friendly, and there's various incentives that you'll see laid out here. Also, we think will drive additional revenues through higher property taxes, both commercial and residential properties, additional utility taxes, additional revenues from permits and fees, and additional sales tax receipts as well. These recommendations obviously would involve, where there's incentives or reduction in tax rate, would involve lower taxes paid by individual taxpayers, but we believe the result will be a net gain for the city in terms of additional businesses being attracted to the city and additional businesses staying in the city over what is currently transpiring. Obviously, this is our belief. What we're looking for is some quantitative analysis that will help the City Council, BTAC, and certainly the mayor determine what is the correct course for the city to take, all with a view to making Los Angeles far more business friendly than it is widely perceived to be today. There are individual recommendations here. I don't know if you wish us to walk through each of them. If you have any questions about each of them, we're happy to address it. I'm fully cognizant of the fact that the meeting is already over 2 hours, so I don't know what time you have.
Well, it's not just that. It's that since we plan on referring it back to Office of Finance for the report on what this study would entail, including the cost estimates, I don't think we need to go through every one of these. By the way, the one thing I would suggest, however, is are these in priority order?
These are not in priority, but our expectation would be to have this RFP issued, and we could have it issued such that when parties respond, they can respond with the net cost estimate for each one of these, what it would take to do a robust analysis of each. We're looking to see to have if an actual model could be built, a predictive model, financial model, so you could almost move some of you do sensitivity analysis to look at various moving parts and see what the net result would be. I mean, yes, this is going to be a very complex study, but in point of fact, I think it's BTAC's view that the current business tax code here in the city of Los Angeles is broken and needs to be fixed, and we're endeavoring to find out the best way to fix it for the city as well as for the employees and employers in the city.
Would it be possible for you to prioritize these?
We could certainly look at that. So yes, I think the answer is we certainly could prioritize it, but I'm not sure what that is. If you're looking, I mean, if you're concerned about the cost of the study, perhaps I'm not sure what the
That might be
what the nature of the inquiry is.
That's part of it, but more importantly, we want to place particular emphasis on those items that you think are more important, or from an impact perspective or otherwise.
Okay. I can tell you we led off with, I think, probably what is the priority recommendation, which is the first one listed. But that is not to take away from the importance of any of the other recommendations that follow.
Okay. Well, then it would be my intent, if there's no objections, to have the Office of Finance come back with a report in 30 days with the assistance of the CAO, City Attorney, to report back to Jobs and Business Development Committee in 30 days with a cost estimate of conducting this study, where the funds will come from, and whether or not there is justification in contracting out for this study.
I noticed you mentioned the Office of Finance, CAO. Did you mean to exclude BTAC from any of that in working with those various entities within the city? Or was that just an oversight?
I'm not understanding you. The role.
My point is that I think BTAC should be involved in whatever study is being conducted with respect to our recommendation.
No, this is not about doing the study. This is about what it would.
No, I appreciate that, but you're asking them to do research here, right? In terms of what the cost of the study would be, and I think you even said at the very end. Can you repeat what you said at the very end? The very last thing you said, council member.
Whether or not there's a justification for contracting this out.
Which means what exactly?
Or whether we could do it in-house.
Whether we can do it in-house or not.
Right.
Okay. I believe that's one of the requirements for an RFP, so we recognize that.
Yeah, I don't, this instruction doesn't exclude you by any means. It's just putting the assignment in one of the offices of the city to come back with this information. I don't think it's exclusive. I'm sure they would have to work with you to know what the content is going to require. Is there a place for me to add them on here? Is there a place for me to add BTAC on here so that
you can, but I think the instruction allows the city staff to work with BTAC.
You want to put them on with the assistance of CAO and City Attorney and BTAC?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let me just ask one thing.
Yeah.
Let me just ask, when the CLA addresses this, is that there's a motion done by Council District 13 that actually asked the CAO to create an analyst position that addresses financial impact on council decisions and such. Could we incorporate something on that motion and find out where that is and how that might?
Absolutely. I understand the CLA and the CAO have been working on a report. We'll check on the status of that report.
And then the other one is that, because I think it's very important on the overall scope of this study, but also I don't know if everything that was studied in the first BTAC ever was implemented, and whether we can go and find out if there are prior studies that were done either internally or externally, and what the results of those were.
All of the items that were adopted at the end of the last BTAC set of recommendations, all of those were implemented. All of the tax reductions and the various other program elements.
And I thought we had somebody that actually outside did some studies as to the whole issue of the taxing issue and the number of categories and things like that?
They actually did, and they actually came in with a recommendation to completely restructure the business tax into a three-part system,
Okay, so
and
that was
BTAC turned down that recommendation as it actually would have needed to go to the voters for implementation because some people would have been paying more tax.
Okay. Was that the only one that was done that was not implemented?
Yes, in terms of a major recommendation that came forward. The issue of pass-throughs remained on the old BTAC agenda with no resolution, and I understand that the current BTAC has shown an interest in taking that up again, so I assume that they expect that the BTAC 2 will consider the pass-through issue.
No, what was remind me of that, the pass-through issue.
Just as a historical memory, in 2002, BTAC did an internal report on the pass-throughs written by Jack Walker. And
remind me of what the pass-through issue is.
the pass-through issue is it creates double taxation.
Okay, I got you now.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you. And that's something we do have of interest in. If you want a copy of that, we'll be happy to produce it from our
Why don't you give that
library.
to John, and, because I remember that was a lot of discussion on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that I think one of the things that's fair in the research that was done the first time around, we were really focused a lot on alternative tax structures. The current request of what we're looking at today from research is really not about alternative tax structures. It's really about modifying the existing tax structure and trying to understand what the benefits would be to reduce rates or come up with incentives and how that impacts revenue and the ability of the changing the perception of the business environment in the city. So it's a little different in terms of what we're looking at to look at this time as opposed to last time.
Mr. Banner is 100% correct. We're looking at working within the existing gross receipts tax structure, but trying to make it work better.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have Maya Zettler?
I'll keep my comments very, very brief because you will be referring this back in 30 days, and we'll just come back both with CCA and the LA Chamber to support moving forward on this RFP. We know that the work and the long hours that the BTAC members have put into this and all of their knowledge and input, and we want to make sure we take advantage of that and move quickly with this so that we can start to implement these recommendations. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then without objection, that will be the order, and we'll see you all in 30 days.
Mr. Chair, can I get a clarification? Did you mean for Office of Finance to work with CAO and City Attorney versus the CAO to prepare a report in conjunct with those departments?
No.
No. You are requesting Office of Finance to prepare the report. It'll be under their signature?
Well, now that you asked that question, I don't know. John, what might you advise?
The Office of Finance is the department that was directed by council to provide support to BTAC, and they're an office that would likely process a study and go through the whole process of releasing an RFP, et cetera. CAO is advisory in that context.
Okay, then.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 3. Thank you very much.
Item number 3 is a motion, Smith, Perry, Gruel, instructing the Community Redevelopment Agency to report back to the Jobs and Business Development Committee to report on any programs available within the city to assist small businesses with storefront improvements and the steps necessary to develop and implement a citywide storefront improvement program.
We don't have a report on this one?
No. It's just a motion before you today.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to amend to include the assistance of the Community Development Department and the Mayor's business team. And I would mention as anecdotally that back in the 90s, under the Reardon administration, there was a program where we did facade improvements for commercial establishments. And I think this is this is needed very badly, and sometimes it might be industrial based or it might be related to business improvement districts. It might be related to particular sectors of our economy or geography, wherever the opportunities may arise. But the fact of the matter is that many locations throughout the city have seen deterioration of the frontages of businesses, and so I support this Perry motion to see what we can do to improve the view as we're driving. We spend so much time driving, it's nice to be able to improve the view. So with that minor amendment, we'd like to approve this, to instruct the CRA to report back to this committee on what programs are available in this category. Citywide storefront improvement, I use the term facades, but sometimes it's not necessarily a facade to improve the storefront. In any case, if there's no objection to that, we'll instruct.
Yes, we can add three things. Three things came through the ARA committee in the last 6 months. One of them was the convenience store conversion program, that a grant through the county, and then there was the CDD application for our money that dealt with the LA municipal and commercial building targeted retrofit program, which is $8 million. And then there was another one that came through for $5 million that dealt with commercial retrofit municipal financing district program. Mm-hmm. So those are three that we're aware of that has come about in the last 6 months.
Yeah, and I think there's probably some that we're already doing,
yeah.
But I believe there are probably more that we could expand, yeah, to incorporate into this. So, and one of the reasons I added Community Development Department is because they've actually worked on some community mobilization efforts to accomplish just that. And even the murals program mm-hmm. can have some impact on this. So there's a lot of little things that we've never really pooled together in terms of one report on how to improve storefronts. So with that, that'll be the order.
Mr. Chair, are you asking that this matter be held back in committee for the CRA to report back to this committee, or are you asking this to go to council?
I don't think we need to send it to council, do we?
Just hold it in committee until the CRA at a future date.
Can we just hold it in committee?
Either way. Either way, it could occur either way.
I think that'll be fine. Just hold it in committee.
Hold it in committee, thank you.
Ask them to report back. By the way, I want to say the city clerk is doing an outstanding job as our clerk here today, and her first day, and she is not intimidated whatsoever.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 4 is a receive and file item. This is relative to Providence Holy Cross and versus the City of Los Angeles. That matter has been long dealt with, and the hospital is almost done. Just went there yesterday. So with that, we'll receive and file this item as it is no longer pertinent. Thank you.
Thank you.
No public comment cards, so this meeting is adjourned.